Welcome, everyone. Just briefly, my name's Michael Roots. I serve as the Membership Director for the APAC region for Procurement Leaders, and I'm delighted to introduce you to the next session today. We're going to be looking a little bit more around the reaction and response to the COVID situation, but predominantly for this session, I'm looking at how we're going to drive business purpose through responsible sourcing as well. So delighted to be partnered with Accenture today, and we have their Managing Director, Vivek Luthra, joining us, as well as Kerry Mock, who's the CEO of Food Solutions at SATS Limited. Both of these guys being based out of Singapore today as well. So very envious for your warm climates there in Singapore. I'm based here in Melbourne. A little bit of a cold and dreary day here. Without further ado, again, delighted to be hosted with you and partnered as well. So Vivek, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Michael, and a very good morning to all of you. Thanks for joining. Michael, it's amazing how Victoria, for last 24 days, has had no cases. So well done to you and the entire machinery. Kudos. I think as we all grapple with figuring out how to best do businesses in these interesting times, I think it will be good to see how things pan out. And I would like to take this opportunity just for a quick introduction. I'm based out of Singapore, as Michael said, and I run our supply chain and operations business in what Accenture called growth markets, so Asia Pacific, Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. And I have with me Kerry. I'm very pleased to have Kerry with me on the discussion today. Kerry is the CEO for SATS Food. Kerry, a quick introduction before we jump straight on.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So I'm the CEO of Food Solutions for SATS. So SATS has got two main business units. One is Gateway Services, which essentially is our ground handling unit. And then I look after the food side. And in the food side, we have both the aviation business as well as a non-aviation. And that also includes food distribution here in Singapore. In fact, we're one of the largest frozen protein distributor here in Singapore as well. So yeah, very pleased to join this session and looking forward to a good one. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry, and thank you for joining us. Look, I think we have a very interesting topic for discussion today, something which I'm pretty close to and passionate about. I think in the earlier sessions, you saw other speakers actually talk about it, at the Congress about driving business purpose, sustainability. So what we're going to be focusing on for the next 25 odd minutes is going to be, how are businesses, driving overall business purpose, and actually try and put a lens of what responsible sourcing can do to drive that overall purpose. So really, what I'm seeing with a lot of our clients, focus around making driving the overall business purpose through responsible sourcing. So the next 22 minutes, let's deep dive into what we are seeing leading clients do. I requested Kerry to join because I think Kerry's organization has been leading this, given their overall business, the type of business they run. This is at the front and center of what they do. So hopefully we'll have an interesting session. So let me just quickly, try and share my screen. And obviously, I think Michael would help us in moderating as we go along. Look, I mean, if you read, I don't know if some of you have been following, I think purpose had never been as important as it is today, post what we've all gone through in terms of the pandemic. I think businesses are reflecting back on what's the real reason for business to be in. Accenture, our own CEO, Julie Sweet, just launched our overall campaign around Let There Be Change, with the overall focus on bringing the human ingenuity and technology, delivering on the promise of what we call human ingenuity and technology. So that's how we as Accenture relate to our overall business purpose and the role which we play in driving shareholder value and contributing to the society and the overall planet around us. So let's kind of deep dive into what we want to talk about in terms of how do you get responsible sourcing to be driving overall business purpose. I think there are several of us who in different parts and ways are contributing to this. I see several companies, across our client base, whether, if we talk about a sector like energy, transitioning to new energy from from fossil to molecules, as we call it, is something which is happening, which is a fundamental infrastructure kind of approach. We think about global technology companies, how green cloud is driving the overall benefits in the path towards sustainability. Things around packaging with consumer goods companies, the whole circular bits of how do we ensure that end to end through our value chains we can minimize inefficiencies. How do we see automotive companies driving specific moves towards reducing carbon emissions? And obviously, with Carrie, we also see SATS as a leader with a lot of leadership being brought in around the agenda of driving business purpose. So I wanted to kind of really pause and maybe get Carrie to come in. Carrie, why do you think in these times has driving a business purpose become so important to so many companies across the globe?
Yeah. Well, I think for SATS, right, we started years ago, about 70 years ago. We started with just very small business, baggage handling and all, and some food business. And at the time, we were part of Singapore Airlines. And back in the early 2000s, we kind of like create a separate entity, and we broke away. But the idea was very simple. We wanted to really specialize and focus on the two segments of the business. But I think more importantly, we want to be very focused around what we do for the community. So our vision around feeding and connecting Asia is what drives a lot of our employees today. We operate in 15 different countries. A lot of it is joint ventures, including also having some of our subsidiaries, fully owned subsidiaries in markets like China. And really, what really binds us together is the fact that there is a need to feed and connect Asia. We know that there is a big purpose here that we can drive, for feeding people in a much more efficient manner, and not just efficient, but also sustainable and also nutritional food. And we do want to leverage on our network and our capability to actually expand that. And since we have that purpose communicated throughout, our employee engagement has been very, very high across the region. And of course, we do work with a lot of different partners to bring forth our vision and strategy as well. And clearly getting the right like-minded partners in the different countries is actually extremely important. The segment that we operate in is actually very much controlled segment, unlike in UK, where any airlines can sponsor a ground handling company to come in. Here in Asia, it's very much based on concession. And therefore, we need to build with the partners and obviously use our know-how and expertise to influence things happening on the ground as well. And clearly in Asia, we do have a huge opportunity to make that effect happen. So I think, having a real purpose to drive the company forward, that doesn't not just touch the leadership position, but down to the guy who's actually doing the ground handling, down to the guy who's actually, preparing the meals to be served on board a plane 35,000 feet up in the air. All these things, you need to connect with the people on the ground to drive the synergy across the group. So that's how we have been very much focused in this area. And clearly, we have been very bold in stating our sustainability goals. I think we'll cover that later in our discussion, but we've been very bold to the point where sometimes when I look at it, I say, wow, those are very tough goals that we're I mean, as a business leader, these are goals that we have committed to our shareholders, and we need to try and achieve that. And it is a journey, right? It is not one where it's a sprint where you get to that end point very, very quickly, but actually it's along the way we keep refining. As technology improves, we try to incorporate some of this new technology in there. And I can talk about some of the food technologies out there that will have an impact on how we feed people around the world in the future as well.
Now that's really insightful. Carrie, last 6 to 8 months, given the tough business environment, has it become even more important from your organization perspective to anchor to the overall business purpose? How has the last 6-8 months unfolded for you? Has it made you even more determined to be driving the larger purpose, or has that become challenging? What have you been through in your business for the last 6-8 months?
Wow. I got to say the last 6-8 months has been a tremendous ride. Maybe I explain a little bit. Our business today, 80% is aviation. So obviously, Singapore is our main hub. Of course, we operate in quite a few different countries as well, including India, China, Malaysia, and all Indonesia as well, and Japan as well, right? So, and you can imagine Japan this year was, earlier this year was meant to be a big growth driver for us because of the Olympics. And as you imagine, even right up to January, we were gearing up. In fact, we invested in a new facility in Haneda. In fact, we have two airside facility in Haneda for catering business, and we're all gearing up for good growth. And in fact, up even February, our numbers were very, very strong. And all of a sudden, when the pandemic hits, I'll tell you that my volume went from 100% to just 2%. And it is extremely, extremely tough when all your revenues were just cut off like that, right? And when we look at our workforce and all that, it's a very large workforce, right? I mean, we have about 17,000 employees across the region. Some of it, and this excludes contract staff as well. And we obviously use a lot of contract staff in our business as well. And when a volume drops like that, it is tremendous, right? And we really gathered very quickly to look at what can we do to help deploy 17,000 people, right, in the midst of all this pandemic. And we're not quite sure when that was going to end, because we have different guys coming telling us that, hey, actually it's going to be a V-shaped recovery, like SARS, 6 months. In fact, the first thing we did was to take our playbook from SARS, right? Back in 2003, we went through the same problem. But this time around, it's interesting, as we did our own business simulation, we came out a conclusion that within a group we have differing views. Some says it's going to be better than SARS because we've learned from SARS, we can come out much stronger and quicker. And there's a bunch of us that felt this one is a little bit different. And so in fact, when we went for a planning perspective, budgeting and all that, we just say, look, it's going to be worse than SARS. So we came with a forecast that says it'll be worse off than SARS, and we think it's going to take at least a year before things will come up. And true enough, as things unfold, things look bleaker and bleaker. And of course, now IATA came out and say it's going to be back in 2024 before pre-COVID number comes back. So we had to do a lot of quick decision making, right? So of course, first thing we did is, unfortunately, we actually cut off a lot of contract staff, because one of the things that we wanted to protect was our core business group. And luckily, our employees were all very open-minded. In fact, we actually repurposed about 10,000 jobs within both our business units. And then in Singapore, I don't know whether people are aware, but there was this big foreign worker challenge that we had. And we were asked to do, we were asked to produce food for the foreign workers. And of course, at the time, the meals that we need to produce was quite high. And just to give you an idea, in the aviation industry, we have chefs that are, Michelin stars, and we're trying to put nice touches to how we serve on board. But in a environment where you're feeding a large number of people, and it's about speed and and how fast you churn out the food, because essentially you have a 4-hour window to actually dish and deliver and have them all well fed. It is a very tough supply chain to work with. But what we did was we actually repurposed the roles, and we've got people who were former baggage handlers. They were open enough to come into the kitchen to help with the cooking. And one of the things that we found, which is very interesting, was cooking rice was a big challenge for us, because the amount of rice that we had to feed a lot of the foreign workers, they needed a lot of rice. Whereas if you imagine you take a flight, the amount of rice that we put on the meal is not a lot. So we had a big supply chain issue on rice, which I I thought was quite amazing. We were looking for additional equipment to cook and all that. But I think the main thing was we were able to quickly pivot this, primarily because a lot of our staff was still very rooted to the core of what we do. And although we are getting them to do stuff that they've never been through before, they were very willing and open to do things. So we had people who were passenger services agents, who help with the check-in. They know that the airport is not kind of essentially shut down. They were more than happy to actually come into the kitchen where it's actually hot, stuffy, and you got to stand in your feet for 8 hours doing dishing. No complaints at all. So we really had people trying to, and of course, with Singapore as well, we have a lot of people who are willing to be kind of branched out. They became social distancing ambassador and all that. Again, skill sets they were never trained to do, but we're all open to doing that, and that helped save jobs, of course, and that allowed us to still maintain our core strength and with a skill set in place. But actually, during this period of time, you realize that a lot of people managed to learn new skill set as well. In fact, one of the union leaders came to us and say, "Hey, I think I can, gather everybody. We can be a really integrated manpower business that, we can apply to different companies, right? Whatever they need, because during the last 6 to 8 months, our workforce has picked up so many skill sets, right? That probably during good times, they will never have a chance to do so. So I think that purpose around what we do helped to bind the company together.
Now, I think that is an amazing story, and congratulations to you and the entire team at SATS. I know that you've been pioneering this. We've been hearing and reading about. I think, in fact, if I reflect on it, the purpose has been driving, your business organization to be even more focused, on really aligning to the overall business purpose, being the food and gateway solutions provider. And I think in these quite challenging times, the resilience shown in terms of being enabled, whether it's the foreign domestic workers or as you were talking about supply chain, the food supply chain, keeping it up and running, it is amazing. I think it's a great segue to talk. So I think for us as Accenture, it's become very clear that purpose has become even now more so important than what it was in the past, because not only shareholders are kind of asking businesses to be focused on that. I think businesses are becoming more relevant to what to the society around them, to the overall planet well-being, so that this can be passed on the generations, right? So look, I think what we wanted to from there dive on was what we see. So we know that purpose is becoming front and center of what businesses are doing as they plan to come out of pandemic and drive long-term sustainability. Based on our experience, we believe responsible sourcing is quite a key theme. And I'm going to kind of leverage Kerry's help on, what he and his organization are doing. But largely, when we look at leaders, we see responsible sourcing helping in driving business purpose from three dimensions. We call them as net zero, trusted, and circularity. Net zero, as obvious, is about the decarbonization. How do we as business contribute to the planet? How do we make sure that businesses are sustainable, that the next generations can reap the rewards of what we've been working towards, becomes very important in terms of approaches to net zero. Different organizations have been announcing their overall approach to being net zero. Even countries and economies are talking about becoming net zero by certain years. So really, net zero is about looking at the impact you as a business today are creating on the overall environment around you. And how do you actually, knowing that, have a strategy to minimize that impact? How do you control your emissions, whether it's things which you directly control in terms of emissions or you indirectly control? So net zero is a good lens of thinking through what's the impact of your business on the environment around you because of carbon. So really, that's one key element. Responsible sourcing can help organizations drive net zero aims in their overall strategy. One, minimizing. I know, for example, in Kerry's organization, he was talking about how they are switching from fossil fuel based equipments which they use in their supply chain to renewable energy sources being used for those HEC kind of equipments and so on and so forth. So some of those measures become very important. The second element around which organizations are building their strategy is what we call trusted. I think Kerry touched upon it. Building a sustainable supply chain, local supplier base, having food security of food supply becomes very important in his business. But really think about trusted as being measured on having trust across the value chain, whether it's your employees. Every organization is becoming a health organization. How do you make sure that the employees are safe? I think that's become very paramount. How do you ensure that the customers, when they are consuming your services, more so in Kerry's organization, they are at ease, trusting the organization they are working with, and that can all be made possible provided the ecosystem is managed well. There is traceability of the end-to-end value chain, knowing who has been leveraged to be able to provide the end product and service to the customers of businesses, right? So think about trusted as a measure which is going to become more and more important. We see leaders actually invest a lot in terms of technology in this. We also see what we call platforms of trust. How do you bring the whole ecosystem to collaborate? So trusted becomes the second key anchor point for, and you can imagine the importance responsible sourcing plays in it. Is my supply chain, am I managing my risks okay? Are my suppliers still solvent? Am I doing the things in the right way? Am I treating my employees well? I think Kerry spoke highly of examples which they have gone about making sure that there is safety for employees there, and so on and so forth. And last but not the least is the dimension of what we call circular. Think about circular as minimizing waste in the end-to-end value chain. So how do we actually make sure our end-to-end value chains are more efficient? Before we start to do or consume something new in terms of raw material, have we exhausted the possibilities of reusing it, right? Whether it's the treatment of water, whether it's the type of packaging you use, where it's coming from, can you reuse that, and so on and so forth. So really circular is at the heart of driving resource efficient business models and ecosystems. So when leaders are today thinking about responsible sourcing, they are trying to define and execute strategy on these three dimensions, which is net zero, trusted, and circularity. And all of them then basically help in defining the overall business purpose. Kerry spoke about business purpose in his business about food safety. So think about how important it becomes for responsible sourcing when it comes to trusted, when it comes to circular. Very key, right? So hopefully, what now, maybe as we move on, so what we typically, work with our clients, we see leaders actually adopt an analytical framework. What you're seeing now on your screens is a snapshot of what we use. We call it a value pivoter. So we are able to benchmark using standards and metrics to be able to say how organizations are faring when it comes to net zero, when it comes to trusted, and when it comes to circular, so that it can help. Think about this like a lens, right? So you have a lens where you can see the dimensions of things which will drive responsible sourcing, which drives the overall business purpose on the dimensions of net zero, trusted, and circular. And working with Kerry, we were trying to see how SATS was focusing on things. You can see here SATS related to the industry is doing very well on circular. In fact, some of the examples which Kerry took earlier, and I'm going to request him to dive into as we get to the next slide, really they are pioneering, right? They are leading in the industry. Similarly, on net zero, the type of work being done, and there is a lot of focus around sustainable supply chains. As we were preparing, Kerry was talking to me about what they were doing on sustainable supply chain. So really think about having a lens which lets you measure where you are when it comes to responsible sourcing, which we call responsible sourcing index, where we use defined standards, and then being able to devise a strategy as to how do you move to top quartile performers, or what leaders are doing in those different elements of net zero, trusted, and circular. So with that, I would like to kind of switch on back to Kerry and talk a little bit about what Kerry and his team are doing when it comes to driving responsible sourcing or overall business purpose. Kerry, I know that you were talking a lot about I think you were very passionate when you spoke about reusable packaging, for example. I believe you've done some acquisition in the past as well. You want to talk a little bit about what are the key themes for you which stand out, where you think you are leading today, things which you are wanting to do more of, and some of the past successes you've had so far. I think it'll be great to kind of spend some minutes on that.
Okay, maybe I'll start a little bit upstream. In the past, when we used to do purchasing and procurement, we normally buy from distributors and all that. Since me and my team kind of came into SATS, we kind of look at the whole end-to-end supply chain, and we're moving upstream. Many things that people don't understand. So, for example, I just take a simple thing like fish. Basa fish is one fish that we use quite a lot in our meals. The natural color of basa fish is actually pinkish in color, but consumers are brought up to think that fish meat has to be white in color. And sometimes when we go down to to see the source, you'll be very surprised, and it's all within WHO limits as well. Actually, they put in a tumbler and chemical to actually bleach the flesh of the fish into white. And a lot of these things the consumers do not know. And in fact, the fish itself, we call it basa, but actually in many different countries, they call it John Dory, Pacific Dory, whatever you call it, right? But actually it's catfish. And it's all found, a lot of it's found in Vietnam as well. But a lot of customers or a lot of consumers don't understand actually, what you eat there, a lot of it is chemical treated as well. Although it's WHO guideline, what we are trying to do now is go upstream. We want to actually put quality checks in order up front. What happens is many times when the fish comes into our location, we do our quality check, we reject the whole lot, right? It's just not sustainable. It's just a bad supply chain. So what we decided to bring the quality checks up front. In fact, we're working now with farms where we're putting quality checks in place. We're going to certify their farms. And we're now working with the farms in Vietnam to say this whole lot is dedicated to SATS. And with that, we get quality monitoring around. It will help them with technologies, right? To say this is the kind of operating parameters we want you to operate at, and we actually help them to get access to technology, so that when it comes to our facility, we know the quality is there. We don't have to check and reject the items, right? So we really try to reduce the waste around there. But I think importantly to the consumer is also traceability, and we know that that's good quality product that they're getting. So that's the upstream thing that we're doing. Of course, within our production itself, I think you will know that one of the big things that in the social media is a lot of consumers are commenting about airline wastage of food. And one of the things that we've done, obviously also together with Accenture, is we're putting digital system in place. We are now looking at even putting this system Blue Yonder. We're trying to do a lot more IBPs with our customers, right? Where we're trying to predict the amount of consumption in each individual flight. So, for example, a lot of red-eye flights. In the past, the airline will just load based on the passenger load. But you realize that most travelers actually do not want to eat at night. So actually, when the item comes back to our facility, we're throwing away a lot of good food, right? And it is just, not sustainable that way. So what we have done is we try to understand, use data to drive what we produce for the very specific flights. And we try to predict also the kind of food that people would like to eat as well, because that also help minimize wastage as well. And together with our airline partners, it's a very time-consuming process, but we think it's a very worthwhile process where we actually look through all the wastages that's coming back, and we set ourselves a goal, right, to actually try and reduce the wastage on board flights. And then with sustainable packaging, I think over the weekend, I don't know whether you have seen some of the news, but we have launched a new service offering together with Singapore Airlines, where we're using sustainable packaging to serve on board the flights. So we're taking away rotables for those flights. In fact, the whole tray, it's all sustainable items. When it comes back to our facility, we actually will put it through an eco-digester, and it converts into a fuel cap that allows us to power the power generator companies in Singapore. So we're trying out different technology. This is just one technology we're trying. In fact, we have a team to try and look at different ways of waste processing, and for us, this is actually extremely important. Of course, the main thing is to reduce the waste in the first place, but you can't eliminate 100% of it. So what do you do is, when it comes back, how do you manage the waste? And interestingly, that allows us to, we also look at reducing of plastics, because I think there's also regulation that says plastics into in Europe will be restricted in future as well. So a lot of things happening in the aviation side that we are using those technology to help us improve our supply chain and hopefully be a more sustainable business, right, going forward.
Thank you, Gary. Those are really interesting examples. Michael, back to you. I think we're just over time now.
Perfect. Thanks, Vivek from Accenture. Thanks so much, Kerry, from that. Yeah, I think we just run over time a little bit, guys. So feel free to head back to the main room, and we'll break for the new sessions as well.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Kerry. Thank you, Michael. Take care.
No worries.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.